It's B2B marketing, right? So, a quick overview of what we are going to cover. We will understand B2B. I'm sure many of you know, but we can just refresh for those who are not familiar. Interesting thing about B2B is it is still customer. It is still a human being we'll be dealing with. It is not that it's an organization. So therefore it is some kind of a disembodied entity. It is a human being there. So customer archetypes, their jobs, pains and gains become very important if you are trying to reach out to them. Depending on the customer archetype, the value proposition will change. If a person has a certain role to perform in the organization, so his need is different. So the value proposition for him will be a little different from somebody else. We just learn about that. Some of you who are venturing out for the first time with a startup idea, there could be a customer discovery issue. I've just kept that point. So in case you haven't found who your customer is, there is a way of discovering those customers. Who's going to pay for your idea? But most of the time, if you're in an existing market, the customer knows the product and he's just going to talk to you about what something superior that they're going to offer to him. But if it's a completely new product and something that you're bringing out for the first time, now who's going to pay? That becomes a big question, and therefore customer discovery is important. How do we interview people? I think most important in B2B is listening and trying to understand the customer from his point of view, putting ourselves in their shoes. And for that, there is a way of asking questions and getting information from the customer. That is more important. Most of the time, salesmen try to do most of the talking and they believe that they have to sell. So, and it is something that every salesperson knows intimately what his product is, what technology he is offering. So tendency is to go and start talking about the product. But a better way to do it is make the customer say what he wants and make him buy. Okay? How do you close a deal and how do you build relationships? So marketing, anybody can give me a definition of marketing. What do you think marketing is? Advertisement. Communicating to any other definition of marketing? Quickly, so that we can... Sorry? Creating a need for your product. Just pass the mic now. Creating a need is marketing. Yeah, if the need doesn't exist, then how do you sell? Any other definitions? Quick top of the mind. Just to get yourself warmed up, because I will say something, but it may seem a little theoretical. So just to...
communicating your product value to the customer.
Communicating. She said advertising. He said creating a need. Any other?
Selling a product to the customer.
Selling a product. Yeah, benefit. Okay, I'm giving my definition. It's just to make things easy. Okay. It is satisfying a customer's needs. Satisfying. Communicating is part of it. Satisfy, finally. Profitably for ourselves. We have to make money at the end of the day, and in a sustainable manner. Each word, I'm just trying to capture what it says. When you're saying satisfy, the purpose of putting this is that marketing covers the entire length and breadth of the organization. It is not just the front end. Especially in B2B, marketing has to take care of the entire chain of value from the supplier to the customer. So therefore, if you do not have the product right, or you don't have the service right, you don't have the value proposition right, there is no question of satisfying a customer. You may make a promise, but he will be disappointed. So a marketing person has to ensure that the delivery happens and the customer is happy. The cycle is closed. We are selling to human beings. When we say customer, it is always a human being sitting there, and he has his own anxieties, he has his own concerns, and as long as we are able to relate to that human being, we are able to make a connection. What are the needs? It's pains and gains. Pains are something that they are losing sleep over. If you find a customer who's losing sleep over something, for example, you're talking about physiotherapy, stress levels. If a person is having serious issues, then you already have a customer ready. If they don't have a pain, then you can have a gain. That means something they have not thought of. There is an additional value that they're going to get. There are also social and emotional needs. People have expectations of others in the system. Like we are in an organization, we want people to respect us. We want prestige when we go outside. We want promotions, we want increments. There are a lot of these needs, and these needs are real. And when customers talk to us, they're talking with all those baggage. And if we ignore any of that, then we may miss out a critical point. Profitability, so therefore cost is very much critical for a marketing person to look at. It's not that it's finance job or purchasing job to look at costs. If your costs are not in place, you will not make money. If you don't make money, you can't sell to the customers. If you don't have money, your business will come to a stop, right? And you can't do good service. After sales service depends on how much money you make. So all these things are important. Sustainability, you have to be competitive. What do you have that somebody else is not able to offer? Okay? And what kind of relationships you maintain. Many times, it's not the price which sells, it's not even the value proposition. It is how well they know you. How much of relationship I have if I like you and I think that you're a person who comes and shares interesting stuff, and I will I'll switch off my phone and talk to you. That's a great relationship to have. And once you have that, you can build more value from the customer. Okay? So essentially what Peter Drucker, many of you would have heard of. Okay, he was a management guru. He is no more now. Marketing and innovation are the only two places where value is created in any organization. Innovation is something that all of us know will create value. You're doing something where nothing existed before. It's only marketing which creates value. Everything else is costs. So let's look at marketing as creating value for all of us, customers, us, suppliers. Okay? Now tell me, what is B2B? I mean, you know it, but how is it different? Why are we spending a session on B2B marketing as if it is something different from B2C? What is it? What is your thinking about what is B2B? Why are we sitting here?
You're not selling to an end consumer.
You're not selling to an end consumer.
Somebody who gets the benefit. More to in B2C, whereas in B2B, the representative of the
Okay, so B2B buyer is not necessarily the consumer. That is one. So how do you sell to somebody who's not going to use your product? That's the point you're making. Yeah, what else? Any other? Is there only one difference or are there many more?
From our perspective, our clients are children.
Yeah. Your clients are children.
But we need to sell it to the schools.
You need to sell to the schools, okay?
Schools, after school.
Again, the same thing. You're saying who's going to use your product is different from who's going to buy your product, right? So let's look at some of the differences. There are some more differences. The first point you already addressed. One, in the case of B2B, he is buying on behalf of somebody else. Your parent will buy on behalf of the child, your doctor may buy on behalf of the patient, or whatever. So there is a buying behavior. In the B2C, usually it is for the self-use. So that's one difference. Process is quite complex, which we'll discuss today. B2C is pretty simple. Most of the time you just impulse buy, you like it, you buy it, okay? Pricing in the case of B2C is more or less fixed. You may get discount offers, but when you go to a shop, largely you know what price it is. Okay, and in B2B, the price is never fixed. That's something we must realize, that price depends on what value we offer, what are the challenges that each customer has. He may be a similar customer to somebody else, but the price can be different. Okay, because the value for them is different. The price is always negotiated. There's no such thing as a fixed price. The driver of choice, when you go to buy your shirt or your trousers or your phone, what do you look for? How do you make your decision? What do you want to buy? Brand. Brand is important, right? Brand is important. In the case of B2B, it's largely relationships. Brand is important, no doubt, but brand alone is not enough. Most of the time, a brand is expensive for a B2B buyer, and if he can develop a good local source who gives them better service, he would rather skip the brand and say, I'll go with you. Because what he's looking for is service quality and not the brand, right? It's relationship. Okay, so these are differences. Number of customers in B2B are fewer, generally, because they are large. But the order size will be very large. So that's the difference. So when it's a large order size, you need to work at it very carefully. It can't be, you can lose an order, or if you do not set the price right, you can lose money. Okay, or if your price is too high, you may lose to competition. Somebody else may bid under and get the business from you. Okay, so therefore it's a complex process, and therefore you need to be very careful about the negotiation, and we'll see how to go about it. And the importance of salesperson. Do you remember who sold you this mobile phone? Well, then you bought it online. Anybody went to a shop and bought something recently for yourself, a t-shirt or something? Do you remember the face of the salesperson or who sold it? You may not, right? So the role of the salesperson is very, very insignificant in a B2C. But in B2B, if you go and buy a house, or you buy if you buy a house for yourself is something, but if you're buying something for your organization, right? You certainly want to know who's the guy, where is he coming from. So the role of the salesperson is very important, and he can make or break a sale. And even after the sale is over, the salesperson is in demand, because he is the person who the company has seen. He is the face of the company, right? And customization is also very high in B2B, because as I said, there are different needs, different requirements. So your product offering will never be standard. You will always find some way of differentiating. Why do we need market segmentation? Do we need it at all? What is segmentation? You don't know? Which market? Okay. Yeah, you need to segment the market, because you can't deal with the whole market. Very simple reason. But how do you segment? If you do not segment the market correctly, then you will be chasing different customers with multiple needs in the same segment. So what happens is, segments must be meaningful. Sometimes they are natural segments. Geography is a natural segment. Industry-wise is a natural segment. If you're saying schools, that's a natural segment. If you're saying 5 years to whatever age of children, that's a natural segment. Okay. Ideally, one segment should not interact with another segment. Okay, they are mutually. That means if you're making a sale to one segment, somebody from the other segment knows about it, then you are going to get into trouble. Okay. So if you're keeping those segments complete, they don't even talk to each other. If that's then you can really play the market differently. Okay, that's how segmentation helps. So end of the day, organizations are run by human beings. So this is something to keep in mind, and therefore all our discussion today is centered around who are those human beings we are going to deal with, and how are we going to impress them too. Who are these people? Typically in an organization, you will have many people who you'll have to deal with, right? One of them is the user, as you said, who uses your product. Who's an influencer? Is there influencer in your segment? Could you name them? Who is that? Medical officer who attends. Correct. Yeah. So somebody will influence, right? Recommender. You know some of this. You should participate. Who's a recommender? Yeah. Recommender can be a government agency which validates your product. It could be a doctor who recommends in his prescription. Okay, a recommender is very powerful. Most of the time, the users in B2B, they don't know what to do. They always have some consultants, people, experts in their field. They will go by what those people say, right? So you should know who the recommenders are and how to reach out to them and what is it they want. Economic buyer, we say economic buyer. Decision maker is the person who will finally decide. He could be the top man. He need not be the top man. It could be the supervisor. It could be anybody down the line. Because if he says, this is me, I'm going to handle it, he can be a decision maker. But again, you need to know who's the person who is going to take the call. Economic buyer is the person, usually the finance person, who would come in and say whether there's a budget or not. And he will question the return on investment. He will have completely different approach to what you're trying to sell. You may have a great product. Your user may be very happy with it. Give me an example. What is your product? Electric bike. Okay, now let's take electric bike. You're going to sell it to Ola or somebody. You're B2B, right? Now, who's the customer there?
It's like a B2C kind of.
So who's the customer? Who will you sell it to? Who do you have in mind?
Ola for that.
So Ola is,
Rapid.
huh?
Rapid, that's the bike taxi.
So you have to see a human being there. Who's that in Ola? Ola is company. Who will you talk to in Ola and tell them this is my product? Salesperson of Ola. Think about it. Okay, anybody? You have a product? Just speak a little loud. Sorry?
The first person that we make contact with, usually the person who handles the innovations.
Purchase manager can be the buyer, could be the buyer. Yeah, but purchase manager doesn't care about many things. He cares about bottom line, how much money he saves for the company. Okay, so there have been cases where a purchase manager has reduced cost and quality has suffered in an organization. He's got promotions, but somebody else was complaining. Now it depends on where the balance of power lies. But economic buyer is important. We can't ignore them. Who's the saboteur? Competitor is different. Let's say, okay, I'm saying within the customer, you're going to meet somebody.
It's already client of some other company. There's a competitor who.
No, he's not. I'm saying this is a customer. Okay, you're meeting all of them and having a negotiation. They are going to talk to them. One of them is a saboteur here. Possible?
Yeah, and these political equations that can correct that when somebody's value goes up and power makes sense.
Somebody who's interested in status quo. You are offering something new. Okay, you're offering a new product. It will save cost. It will save something faster, better, cheaper, whatever it is. But somebody already has some relationship going, so he will try to sabotage. And unless you know who that person is, and unless you take him on your side, we don't know how powerful he's going to be. Okay, so each of them has got an archetype. Archetype is a persona. I mean, they have a particular age, they have a certain profile. So why I'm saying all this is, the more we understand the customer, the better our chances of making the sale. Otherwise, it will not happen. The relationship starts with understanding each of these people, what are their roles are. So I said B2B is actually human to human. H2S stands for human. You are a human being. You're going to talk to another human being, and that's how the sale happens. There is no magic, there's no formula, right? Sorry, yes.
He's already made up his mind about not wanting the product for some reason.
Yes, possible.
And you have a product which is much superior to the existing product or something new which is going to address new areas. What is it that you can do to get the saboteur back to come onto your side?
Yeah. Let me give you an example. There was a company which was making modular accommodation for civil constructors, right? For people who are building buildings, the labor who comes and works there, they don't have a place to stay. So there were modular construction. So one way to do that, the saboteur there was the person who was arranging the accommodation for them, and he was getting a cut from the hotels and so on. Okay, now that whole business will go for him if somebody else gives an offering. So one way out is to see whether somebody higher than the saboteur can overrule him. That's one way out. There is a point beyond which companies will not tolerate these kind of, if the need is strong enough for them to change and your value proposition is powerful enough, you can overrule the saboteur. He may make some noises, but that's a call you can take. The other thing, if he is very powerful and if you feel that he can make or break your deal, then you'll have to involve him in the process. Which is to say, okay, instead of my selling directly, I'll sell through this guy, for example. You can make him your agent, or you can make him some. These are things depending on what unfolds in the interviews that you're having. The saboteur has something to lose. Right? So we need to assess what is it he's going to lose, and how can we, Yeah, it's not exactly compensate. How do we make him, think this is more valuable than that? Okay, so if there are specific examples, we can look at it. I'm saying one of them is you make him a partner. You find out what is it that he is in his mind. He may be genuine also. I mean, saboteur doesn't mean that he is always having some ulterior negative motives. He could also be genuinely concerned about quality or some aspect of the business, and he will not compromise. Whereas we are trying to tell him, a cheaper product or something like that. So there could be a genuine reason. So based on that, it is possible to win him over. If you can't win him over, you have no deal. If he's powerful enough. So it's important to recognize. The point that I'm making here is if you do not recognize these players, then the sale will go somewhere. You may think that sale is happening, but there's something which is not being talked about openly, which is blocking the sale. And you may spend weeks and months and find that nothing is happening. So it's better to understand these people and who are these people and what are the roles they are performing. So how do you understand the buying center? We said there are many people. How do you go about identifying who's who? Okay, the easiest way is to start with the user. Go to the user and say, this is what you've been using today. Now I have a different product for you to use, a different service. What do you think of it? So he will certainly, if you think there's a value proposition for the user, he will be interested and he will be engaging with you. After the user has accepted the product or he is familiar with it or he wants to take it forward, the next step is to see who all will be involved in the buying process. So certainly his superior will be involved, because superior is responsible for this person's performance. So he has a say in what the user is going to do, depending on what level he is. If there's a higher level C-suite person who's there, a CXO, who will make the call. So that is one way to go about. Start with the user. Many times you can't meet the user. Many times if you go to an organization and say, I want to go to, if I go to the factory and say, I want to go to the shop floor, or you want to go and meet somebody inside, it may be difficult. So they say, go to the purchase manager straight away. You cannot. So in that case, you have an option. You can go to the purchase. But end of the day, you have to understand how the system works. That's the next point I want to say. I don't know what happened to it. There are formal and informal structures. You have a formal organization where there is a hierarchy and there are people who will be, but there is an informal organization which works in most companies, where a junior person may have a lot of say in what is happening, right? So understand each. Now many of you are startups, I think. All of you are startups, right? We want to be in the 10% that succeed. 90% of startups fail is what is the statistics showing. We are here because we want to see if 10%, we are in the 10%. What do 90% fail? Any thoughts? Not able to sell the product. Yeah. Geography. Not the product is not in demand in the geography. Time. Ahead of time. Market is not ready for the product, but you launched it. Anything else? Most of you are correct. I mean, the main reason is, what the hell is this? There is no market need. Most of the time, the product is created in a lab or in an environment where the founders are quite happy with what they have developed. This is the reason internationally, because all of us are very clear about how we perceive the world, how we perceive what is demand over there, and then we work on the product and develop the product. But when we go out there, we find there is nobody. So therefore, customer discovery becomes a very critical aspect. The next biggest reason is running out of cash. Okay, most of the cash is sucked away by working on the product instead of working on the customer. Okay, and so I think the main one is what we are looking at here. Most startups fail from lack of customers than of product failure. So it's important that your product, whatever time you're spending on your product is important, certainly, but do not ignore to look at it from the customer point of view. So before you venture into the market, it's good to try and ascertain what is the size of the market. Because you have sacrificed your, let's say, a job or a career and saying, I want to do a startup, right? Which means there has to be, market has to be big enough. So what is the size of the market? What is your product?
It's our launch vehicle.
You are in launch vehicle. Okay, so how do you decide what is your target market? Let's say total, we are looking at a total available market. What is the purpose of your launch vehicle?
To carry satellites.
To carry satellites.
Yeah.
So who are the people who want to carry satellites?
Any governmental organization,
Any government will want to,
academic institutions,
academic institutions
and satellite industry.
and industries.
Yeah.
So industries, academic institutions and governments will want to launch satellites, right? So all of them are your market. All the institutions, all the governments, all industries is your total market. Okay? Served available market is what? If you take that. When I say served, it's not that all of them, how many people could use my product? All of them could use. But how many of them need my product? How many of those institutions actually need a satellite to be launched? There must be some criteria. It would have a certain size of the organization or a certain,
So
what do you
among
think?
the industries, communication industries specifically need.
Communication industry. So when you say industry, you're saying communication industry. And government? Any government. Is there a
Any government.
state government, central government, local government?
Union governments, yeah. Central governments.
So that is your served available market. I mean, you can take another example and see. Your example. What is your total market? This is you're teaching aeronautics through art. So who are the people? Anybody? Anyone. Literally anyone. But you said children below 5 and
Yeah, 5 to 14.
5 to 14.
It's global.
That is what you have
close.
decided.
Yes.
But anybody can.
Anybody.
Why
can.
did you decide 5 to 14?
Because we can pull them into the surreal zone, the story. When we tell them the story, they believe it.
Okay. So out of the total population, your served available market is 5 to 15. Now what is target market? Prasad?
That's where geography comes into, whether it is only in Chennai or
Okay, it
Whether
can
you
be
are-
geography.
Yeah.
It can be geography, but if it's a online product, it need not be geography. But served available market is all those people who need your product. Obviously, you can't satisfy all of them from day one. It may be a very large market, right? But you will choose. Out of that, you will choose and say, okay, I may choose geography as one of the reasons. I'm in Chennai, so I will look at Tamil Nadu, Bangalore, or somewhere. Or I may have metro cities as served available market. I may choose, geography is one, but you can also say I will choose only these kind of government institutions or private institutions or whatever. So you're choosing here. Why are you choosing your target market? Is because you want to make some money, you want to make some business. So you have to fix that amount of how much money you want to make, and that decides the size of your target market. Who will be my most likely buyers in the years 1, 2 and 3? That's all you're looking at. Once you decide this, then you know whether you have a big enough market to chase. That will give you the impetus to go after that. Just give me a minute, I'll come to that. Just give me a minute. It's a good question. So this is an example of a sports nutrition market. Within that is energy bar, within that there are endurance athletes. So you are basically, this is one company which has looked at how to go from the large universe to the smaller universe. Your question was if it's a disruptive product, what to do? Okay, there are three types of markets that we are talking about. This is market type. One is an existing market, the other is a resegmented market, and the third is a new market. What you're saying is a new market. Now, what is an existing market? Are you in an existing market? Does a market exist for what your product you're selling? There are. No, existing market means before you entered into the market, was there this thing happening? No. So you're in a new market, right? Anybody in an existing market? You are in existing, rocket launching is existing market, right? Okay, so you are in an existing market, but are you resegmenting that market? You are resegmenting. An existing market is very large. One is you can go and play in the entire market. Because what it says is I have a faster, better product. I will go and I don't care. If I come with the iPhone and people are with, or if somebody is in a Micromax which came in suddenly, for example, or Oppo or some of the lower end smartphones which came in, they attacked the entire market. They were not looking at resegment. They said whoever wants to buy can buy. So that's one approach. The other is you're creating a niche. I was saying, look, instead of spending crores of rupees, come to me with few lakhs, I can launch a rocket for you. Okay, yours is probably a new market, I guess, right? So a new market is something which never existed before. Okay, now how do you estimate? You were asking how do you estimate a target market when you don't have a customer, right? So therefore the customer discovery is the first one which we'll come to. But you know the value that you're selling, the value of the price of whatever service that you're offering, you have some idea, right? So one simple way is multiply that into number of customers that you're going to reach out to. That gives you the target market size. Is that market big enough? What is the price that you are offering? Sorry? 5,000 rupees per annum. It's a subscription, is it? So 5,000 rupees per annum. So if you want a market of 500 crores, suppose, I'm just saying, if that is your, so you need X number of people, and whether such people exist is what you have to determine before you start stepping out. How do you get these people will come to? Because you have to identify who's the customer, who's going to pay. For a new product, who is going to pay is going to be a very difficult question. What is your product, sir?
High capacity coaches.
High capacity?
High capacity coaches.
Coaches. Coaches for like trains?
Train and buses.
High capacity?
Yes.
So what is the value you're offering? You're saying you can carry more people?
Yes. About 100% more people can be seated.
In the same volume?
In the same volume.
Okay. So there's some special technology there?
Yes, I have taken a patent.
Okay. So I don't know if it's a new market, you are actually trying to get into the coach market which exists today.
Yes,
And you expect them to move from existing coaches to new coaches.
exactly.
So typically your customer will be a state transport organization?
Yes.
Is one of them? So, so
Railways,
customer exists.
railways and state transport.
Railways and state transport corporations. So you want them to buy your product and replace the existing product.
Exactly.
Okay, there the sabotage will come in, because discarding the current inventory of coaches that they have will be a big barrier for them. I'm
Yes,
guessing.
definitely.
What will they do with that? Can you modify?
No.
So you have to ask them to throw it away.
Yes.
So that will be one issue which will come. But to estimate the market, you know the market now. You know how many coaches are there, how many buses are running on the road. If you take the entire thing and convert it into suppose replace the whole thing into your coaches, maybe you need half the number of coaches.
Exactly.
50% reduction straight away. But you may be charging something more, because you're not going to give it at the same cost.
Marginally more.
Marginally more. So if you multiply the two, you get to know this is my total market. But out of that, not everybody is going to jump on day one and say tomorrow I am going to replace all my coaches. So there has to be a phased manner of replacing. Whether there are some state transport corporations which may be on the cutting edge of technology. There may be others in the rural sector who may be running some dilapidated transport, let's say. So these may go there. You may have to give them a solution for that. If you don't give them an idea how to handle their current inventory, because that's what will affect that person. He will have a need, what to do. And there will be a write-off. The buyer will say, look, I will be writing off so much of assets. In my books it will show as losses. And where will I dump them? So there may be various questions which will come. Yeah. But you can figure out the value of the market, and then you need to see how to make the sale go forward, which we will cover now. So we are looking at customer development. So in some cases where you don't know your customer, you just have some guesswork about your customer. You have a hypothesis saying, this is my customer. You may not be sure that he is your customer. Why I am saying this is, today you are assuming that if I go with a double capacity coach, people will definitely buy. That is based on an assumption that they are looking for a solution like that. Okay, but if they are quite happy with the way the coaches are run today, for example, and they have their maintenance network, repair systems, bodybuilding, they're trained engineers who can maintain the coaches, all of them have got a certain skill. Now they will say, this new coach is coming, I don't know how to. So there may be a lot of concerns for them when a technology change comes. So that is where the customer discovery becomes important. Does he have a pain area today? If he doesn't have a pain, will he come and buy my product? You get what I'm saying? Is transporting people on coaches today worrying whoever is the customer also? Who is the person you'll talk to? Government, who? You can't go to government, somebody, individual. Sorry? Transportation Ministry, but who in the Transportation Ministry? Gadkari. Now you should see, I'm asking this, I mean, does Gadkari, is he losing sleep today because of inability to transport people? Is that top of his list of issues? That's what you have to see. If there are so many other things in his mind and this is not top of the mind, then we'll have to see how to bring it. Or is there somebody else in a state government? So you need to navigate that terrain to understand whether, because you need to get an audience first. Somebody has to understand what you're trying to sell and what is the benefit for him. What is the value proposition for him? How are you going to, what will you tell Gadkari when you meet? 200% additional people.
I mean, 200 persons. Assume a coach is now 100 capacity. 200 people can be transported at about 25% extra cost.
So what does it mean for Gadkari?
That means it makes up, instead of going in for new coaches otherwise, he would be saving around 75% of his cost for every 2 coaches.
What will he do with the coaches that he has?
That's something to be...
Immediately that problem will...
I am a metallurgist, so I would take all this to the steel industry.
You have to give him that.
Yeah.
You have to think through that solution. Okay, so you're saying that you have a value addition for, let's say, a psychologist. Right? So what is the pain area the psychologist is facing today?
They have to evaluate the patient through iterative mechanism, because they give a questionnaire, they give exercise, the patient comes back, they observe the change in the behavior. So it's a longish process.
Yeah.
Our system will give him an objective measure which he can track. So he's more sure of what intervention he is suggesting.
No, will he save? You're saying he will save time? What will he save?
Yeah, I think the quality of the service and the outcomes will improve.
There's a little, you have to be more specific.
Okay.
Because
See,
what is meant by
eventually he
outcome?
wants his patient to go out cured in a given period of time, because psychological treatment...
We are assuming it's not happening today.
Yeah, we understand that it's a long process. It takes 2 to 3 months for the patients to see the result. With this, maybe they can show the result in 1 month.
So that's what you're saying. You're saying the time to cure a patient will get reduced.
Reduce, yes.
Will that help the psychologist? I'm posing a question because
Yeah.
if I see the patient 2 months, I get double the money.
True.
If a patient gets cured faster,
Yeah, so when we look at it from the competition, there's one psychologist who is competing with another, and
Yeah.
somebody showing you a better result that's compared to that.
so you're saying
There's a
he'll get more business.
more business recommendations, and then that.
So these are things, these are assumptions that you are carrying.
Yes,
So these
yes.
are something you need to validate in the field. That's
Yes.
that's what we are saying. These hypotheses must be turned into facts. If you go and meet any number of psychologists and see that, they are there are enough patients for them that even if they are able to send them off in 1 month, they will continue to get patients and they can charge a premium. The patient saves money. So instead of paying 100 rupees a session, let's say he pays 150 rupees a session, but he would have got cured in half the time. It's still win-win for the patient and so then you have a business proposition. But is that a fact is what you have to verify. If you do that, then you got a customer. But it is still not ready to scale up because how many such customers are there? You may meet few, but do you really have a market? If you go to Bombay, is it different? In Pune, is it different? Bangalore, is it so where are there? What kind of people are facing these psychological problems, and are all of them related to physiology? So therefore, your system can pick it up. That also I don't know. Whether all kinds of psychological issues you can pick up. So some of those things, when you validate, once you finish this, then you are ready to scale up. So those who haven't done customer discovery, it's better to start here. That's the point that is making here, okay? To do that, you identify the customer. Who's the customer? If you say Gadgari, he is not the only person. He will have a lot of people working under him. Okay, so each of them will come with some issue. Maintenance manager will come with some issue. The operations guy will say something. Finance guy will say something. All of them are trying to do some job. Any customer is trying to do some job. He is there because he is getting paid, okay, by his company to achieve some results. So that is all that he's got in his mind. If you are sitting in an office, your boss is going to watch what you're doing. You have to report to him. So that is all that is bothering the people. So you need to understand what is it that they are trying to achieve. If he's a finance guy, what is he trying to achieve? If he's a marketing guy, what is he trying to achieve? As we saw, there are different customer, archetypes. In trying to achieve that, is he voicing any pain? In Gadgari trying to run the country, without your prompting, is he saying, yes, I have a problem. I don't know how to manage people movement. I wish I had more trains. I wish I had more buses. But to order a bus, it takes so long. By the time population is growing. Something, if he says something to that effect, then you can say that there is a pain and you have a pain reliever for that. If the pain is not connected with your pain reliever, then there is no fit. Similarly, gain. Gain means how much money. Suppose the transport corporation is running at a loss today. Maybe many of them are running at a loss because they can't increase their price, ticket price. Okay? But their costs are going up. So there is a gain. So your product should, if it satisfies this and this, then you are having an opportunity to create a business. This is important. Always look from the customer point of view. Okay?